Hello, my name is Alan Jones, and I give you a welcome to another life story coming to you from Life Stories Worldwide. We bring you stories from all over the world, and these stories go out again to different parts of the world. We bring you stories of people who've gone through all types of struggles and obstacles in their lives, and today is one like that. Our story, we're going to hear it shortly. We are live on StreamYard, Facebook, YouTube. You can also watch us on our website, Lifestoriesworldwide.com. That's probably one of the easiest ways to watch. As I said, we bring you stories of people who've gone through struggles. And today, we have an angel with us. We're getting near Christmas, and we have an angel with us, Gareth Angel Thompson. He'll share about that in his story. But Gareth came from a very bad background. In many struggles in his life. He came from a fatherless, broken home, of neglect, alcoholism, poverty, bullying. He was made homeless at 15 and lived in a skip. In his teenage years, he had different jobs, but he came through, and you're going to hear today how that life was transformed. Gareth is from West Yorkshire, and I hand over now to him to share his story. Thanks, Gareth.
Thank you, Alan. Great. Yeah, so pleasure to be with you all today. Thank you for tuning in. Yes, Gareth Angel Thompson is my name, and I'll get into where that angel bit comes from a little bit further. But yeah, as Alan alluded to there, I grew up in quite a troubled childhood. I'm from Keighley originally, which is a little town just outside of Bradford in West Yorkshire, from a council estate. My father left when I was 6, and when that happened, my mum turned to alcohol. That was her escape. I had 2 younger brothers at the time, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I would take them to the primary school and reception. In the morning, I'd take them to school, and then after school, I'd go into the town centre and I would go around all the pubs and bars to eventually find my mum. She'd either be cleaning in one of them or drinking in one of them or just hanging out with her friends. And I would then get the house keys, I'd take my brothers home, and I'd feed them and put them to bed. Then my mum would come home drunk later that night, and I'd feed her and put her to bed. That was my everyday childhood. That was what I thought was normal. The only escape I had from any of that was on a Friday night, I'd go and stay with my grandmother. Her name was Gladys. My family were all from Kinethley, South Wales, hence Gareth, strong Welsh name. But my grandmother was a devout Catholic. She had more pictures of Mary in her house than she had of her own children. But on a Friday night, I'd stay at my grandmother's. We'd watch Have I Got News for You and the comedy shows late at night. But we'd also sit down and watch professional wrestling together. Now, she was a big World of Sport wrestling fan. Big Daddy, Giant Haystacks, Mick McManus, Kendo Nagasaki, the old bruisers and brawlers of the 60s and 70s. But I was a WWF fan. I was looking at The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin, the Attitude Era of the American wrestling. And we'd compare. And she'd tell me that they were her guys, and I'd say, well, these are my guys. That was my escape from home life on a Friday night. But sometimes I would go back home on a Saturday and it would be the weekend and my mum would go out again and she'd be out with her friends late at night. Sometimes she'd take us around some of the pubs and every now and then she'd leave us with babysitters. One of those was an older male relative of mine. And between the ages of 7 and 8, he sexually abused me. It would happen whenever he babysat for us. I won't go into the detail, but it was quite horrific. It took me a long time to pluck up the courage to eventually tell my mum what was going on. And I do remember when it happened because it was November 11th. There were poppies everywhere. And it was 1995. So 8-year-old little Gaz Thompson, his mum comes home late at night. My cousin had left. And I told my mum, this has just happened. Thankfully, she believed me. The police were called. I was taken to a local hospital. Tests were done. And I was given a certificate for a McDonald's Happy Meal because I was brave. My mum had that on the wall in the house for many years, almost like a certificate, a badge of honor of how brave her little boy was, when the reality is that should never have happened in the first place. I had a trial that I had to give evidence in, even as a young boy, through a video screen similar to this into the courtroom. He was only young himself. He was only 13 at the time. So it was a juvenile court, and he went to prison for what he did. He was in prison for a number of years. And when I had kind of all of that dealt with, I took a break from school. I had counsellors who used to come in and see me. I had special measures. I was in and out of classrooms. I would be sent to a PRU, a pupil referral unit, in when I was in my early teens. And I was starting to get bullied at school because word had got out what had happened. And that was where I learned how to fight, because I had no choice. I was either being attacked or having to kind of defend myself. So I became quite aggressive as a young man. And that followed me into secondary school. And then at the age of 15, just as I was heading into exam season, my mum had been away on a bit of a drink binge and had been gone for a couple of weeks. Took my younger brother with her. And by this point, my middle brother was also in care. She came home and she'd seen that to kind of keep the house running, I'd gone and got a job as a window cleaner and doing a paper round to be able to buy food to feed myself. She said, "Oh, well, you're big enough now to have a job and to look after yourself." So she threw me out on the streets. My grandmother wasn't there. She'd gone back down to Wales that summer. And I found myself living in a skip. It was the warmest, driest place I could find. And it was a big biffer bin at the back of Curry's, an electrical store, full of polystyrene and cardboard. And it was dry and it was warm and it was comfortable. I would go around the local town centre and I would steal food from Woolworths and Greggs, because Woolworths had a door on either side, so I could run through and grab tins, and I would then break the tins open on walls and I'd drink them cold. My favourite being beans with sausages, because it actually tasted quite nice even cold. By the age of 16, I was then picked up by some homeless outreach teams involved with the council and other stuff, and I was moved into a homeless hostel. This was called Bradford Foyer. So I moved from Keighley to Bradford, a whole new city, no friends, nothing kind of going on. And I moved into this homeless hostel. While I was there, you'd think, okay, there's a roof over my head now. It's a little bed sit room where I had like a bed, a cupboard, a TV, which I could have my PlayStation in, because I managed to save up some of my dole money to get a PlayStation so I could play wrestling games, and a sink and a shower. And I shared a living room space with 3 other people. Okay, I'm off the streets. There's a roof over my head. I've got a PlayStation. I'm starting to look for work. You'd think, okay, this is good. But actually, in those hostels, there's a lot of broken people. A lot of people who have been through stuff and ended up there, similar to how I had. And they all stole from each other. They all fought with each other. There was people taking drugs. There was people self-harming. It was a really horrific place to be. And again, I'm there having to fight and scrap and to survive, essentially, as a young man. By the age of 2021, I managed to get out of there. I found myself back in Keighley. I've got a roof over my head. I was renting. I've been bouncing in between jobs, trying to keep jobs down. I'd racked up a couple of debts. I didn't know how to run a home. No one had taught me that you had to pay for water. I thought it was 3. I didn't even know what council tax was. And so whenever I'd have a good wage come in, I'd buy things and try and kind of keep on top of things. And then I'd lose the job 6 to 8 weeks later, and then I'd have to find another. And this just caused a whole mess in my finances. And then one day I came over to Bradford to go and get a piercing. I've got the long hair and the tattoos, and that's all kind of part of the scene that I was in at the time. And I got my tongue pierced. And as I left the studio, I was with my girlfriend at the time, and she saw a friend across the street and just ran over, and they kind of were catching up and so happy to see each other. And so I joined them, and there was another guy there who was the other girl's partner, and they said, "Oh, come back to ours, we can hang out." There's a couple called Donna and Eddie Teal. So we started hanging out, with drinking beers and playing Call of Duty, and we struck up a friendship with these guys. And over a number of months, we used to come over every other weekend and hang out. Then randomly one morning, while I'm admittedly hungover, they said, "Do you want to come to church with us?" Now, I'd been to church as a kid. My primary school and secondary school was Roman Catholic. My gran took me to mass sometimes. So I was expecting pews and organs and choirs. I even sang in the choir as a young boy. That's what I expected. But when I walked into this church, St. John's, West Bowling in Bradford, there was open seating, there was a live band, there was coffee, there was kids running around at the back, like jumping onto big bean bags. And it just felt very, very different. And the vicar, Howard Astin, shook my hand at the door and took me for a coffee. So I walk into the service, and with my girlfriend and our friends, And I sit second row. I wasn't so keen to sit at the front, but I thought I wanted to kind of take this in and experience it. So I'm sat second row, and the worship starts, and they're singing songs about love. And this is where it kind of got tricky, because all of a sudden, I'm starting to feel emotions that I didn't know that I even could have. I'm sobbing. There's tears running down my face. I'm shaking, and they're singing, and I'm trying to sing. And before you know it, about 2 songs in, I am ugly crying. I am weeping in the second row. I got it together for the preach. Can't remember what Howard said, but at the end of the service, a guy came over to me, and he said, "Hey, I saw you crying." And I was like, "No, you didn't. The hard act came on, right?" I'm like, No, you didn't see me crying." And he goes, "No, I did, and I can tell you why." Okay, then, amuse me. If I was crying, why would I have been crying? And he said this, and it stuck with me ever since. He said, "You've just felt love for the first time in your life, and you didn't know what to do with it." And that was correct. That was nail on the head. He couldn't have got any better. Clearly, divine Holy Spirit moment there, him speaking to me. And I had no answer for him. And he said, "You need to give this a go. You need to give Jesus a go." So I started attending the church. Every other weekend, we'd come over and hang out with Donna and Ed, and we'd go to church. They'd have Saturday night services that were a little bit more kind of relaxed. So we went to those. And I went to a home church, and I got stuck into Bible study and prayer and trying to figure things out and asking questions and trying to learn all about Jesus and about what his ministry meant, and digging into all the books of the Bible and why is it written the way it is. And I had a lot of questions. And I thought, I'm kind of heading in the right direction. I've got myself moved over to Bradford. We got a house near the church. I'm working again. Me and my girlfriend are doing really well. We got engaged, and we thought, okay, let's get married at the church. So wedding day comes along, and we're there at the church, and my grandmother's there, and she'd been having episodes of dementia that had got quite serious enough for her to have to be moved into supported accommodation. She started forgetting who people were. But there she was on my wedding day, and she was the best I'd seen her in years at this point. She was happy. She was shouting out in the service. There's this one point in the service where I've got purple in my hair then, and she just shouts out, thick Welsh accent, "Gareth, wash that purple out your hair. You look stupid." I just was like, there she is. There's my grandmother. And I had a great moment with her outside where she was in her chair, and I got to tell her that I love her and thank you for being there. And she went home that night, and my mum had to take her back early because she wasn't very well. And the next day, I'm in the hotel with my wife, and the phone rings, and it's my youngest brother. And he tells me over the phone that my grandmother had gone home that night and she passed away in her sleep. That hit me quite hard. I thought at this point, I'm on the winning team, right? I'm following Jesus. I'm trying to do my best. Bad things don't happen anymore, right? It's clearly not the case, because within 6 months of that happening, not long after I buried my grandmother, I then find out that my new wife had been having an affair with a friend of mine, who ironically was the guy who introduced me to a training school to learn how to be a professional wrestler. So as my faith journey had started, I also started pursuing this childhood dream of being a professional wrestler. And the two things have evolved alongside each other all the way through my story. And this guy, we used to travel to Blackburn together, and I let him stay in my home, and I find out this is happening. I took it, again, quite hard. I'm still reeling from my grandmother's death. My wife then throws me out. I lose my job. I start drinking. And before I know it, I'm living in a box room in a shared house, and everything's fallen apart. I'm in debt. We'd gone from 2 full-time incomes to me being on benefits, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I'm there in this room, and everything's closing in, and everything feels like it did when I was in that hostel, when I was in that skip, when I was in that bedroom after what had happened when I was a kid. And I just reverted back to what I did before. I just mask on, survive, survive, survive. And I stopped going to the church. I stopped praying. I stopped giving God the glory because I didn't really feel it. And then a guy from the church called Dave Kendall. And if there's any men listening here who are Christians, or any men who aren't even, find yourself a good Christian guy, because Dave Kendall literally came to my house, kicked down the door practically, and sat in my kitchen with me and said, guys, I want to help you deal with what's going on. He knew I hadn't been at church. He knew that my marriage had fallen apart. And he's like a middle-class guy. He spoke so posh compared to me. It's this Yorkshire lad. And he wasn't a fighter. Yet he sat across the table from a professional wrestler who's been scrapping since he was a kid. And he's talking straight to me. And he's saying, we need to get this dealt with. And so we went on a journey together. I really bonded with Dave. We're still good friends now. And we went on this journey of forgiveness. He identified quite early on that a lot of the character traits that I had and the damage that I was carrying was from my childhood, and it was from bad things that happened to me. So he was like, we need to kind of deal with that and put it on the cross, and we need to give it to Jesus. So I went and had a very long and frank discussion with my mum about my childhood and what had happened. And every now and then she'd pull out a social services report and she would say things like, oh, but there was food in the cupboard. And I'm like, but Mum, that's not the point. And we had to really hash it out.